What's up, everybody? I'm Casey, and you're watching Watch a Few Movies, Take a Few Notes, my brand new YouTube movie review channel. And today I'm going to be reviewing the movie Scream from 1996 by Wes Craven.
Someone is playing a deadly game. Not scared, are you? Scream.
If you haven't seen it before, in 25 years, I don't know what you've been doing, but this is your spoiler warning. There will be plenty of spoilers in this review. All right, so let's get it going. This movie, came out at a time where horror was in a terrible place. Some of my favorites like Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Friday the 13th had dropped some of their worst movies. People weren't coming to see these movies anymore because they weren't scared. They kind of looked at them as, comedy, and a lot of the other, franchises were going straight to video. And this was the direction the entire genre was going before this movie was made. So Scream kind of helped save this genre. It was very meta. It was something that we never saw before. The characters in the movies knew about the movies that we knew about, which was something, totally new. And I think that's what attracted Wes Craven to direct this movie after he read Kevin Williamson's script. On top of it being like very meta and fresh, it was very funny. They had characters in there, it just felt like real organic conversations. And, movies before this, the cast was pretty much full of people you didn't know, you didn't care about, and you're just waiting for the killer to take them out. This wasn't the case in this movie. This movie is inspired by a true story. A Florida man, of course, took out a couple people, became a huge story in the early 90s as a serial killer. I think the Gainesville Ripper, it was called. And after that, Kevin Williamson got inspired, he wrote the script, and that's how we got it. The story takes place in a fictional town in California, and it follows Sidney Prescott, who just lost her mother a year ago, and now she's being stalked by a killer who uses horror movie trivia to take out her and her friends. That alone is much scarier than someone with fake supernatural powers, like Michael or Freddy or Jason. Although I love those movies, but this movie, feels like it can actually happen. Like it could be your next door neighbor. And that was something that definitely, stood out about this movie to me. Something else that this movie does really well is point out all the crazy cliches from the 80s. It has a particular scene where a character is pretty much talking about, only the virgins survive, so you can't have sex, you can't drink or smoke, or say I'll be right back.
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie.
And these were actually the real cliches and rules that, Hollywood was following when it came to horror movies, and people kind of got tired of them. So this movie kind of, looked at that and made sure that their characters knew that. And that was something we never saw before. The characters knew exactly what we knew. So that was something that definitely drew me to this movie, and it's definitely a like for me. The opening to this scene, starring Drew Barrymore, I mean, when you see her, there's a sense of safety because she's a big star, and at that time, she's a little bit known more than the other cast members. It starts off, she receives a phone call, and it starts off real, sweet. It's just her and this guy who's, actually the killer. They're talking as if they're, old college friends, and they're talking about their favorite movies. She's even flirting a little bit, even though she has a boyfriend, very messy. And then it gets creepy. He starts to say stuff like, I want to know who I'm looking at. So she gets creeped out, threatens him, and says her boyfriend is going to come. But little does she know, they already have her boyfriend tied up in the backyard. So she gets spooked out. They come in, it's a huge chase scene, and this scene is filled with so much tension because you think Drew Barrymore, she is the most familiar person on the poster. Even if you go back and look, her face is the first one that you see, and she's about to get killed. So when you're sitting watching it, you're like, damn, and that's what she wanted. Drew Barrymore actually wanted to be in this movie and take the backup role, not the Sidney Prescott role, because she thought that, if she got killed first, then the audience wouldn't know where this movie was going. And that was something that we needed in the genre. It was just like a shot in the arm. And she gets killed in the first 15 minutes. It's very gruesome. She gets hung on a tree, while her parents, they discover her body. And the funny part about that scene is that if you watch it, it gets sped up really fast because, the censorship was like, if you do this, we're gonna have to give you an NC-17. So Wes Craven had to speed it up so we can even see that part. So that's the opening scene. So that's top 5 in horror movies and movies alone in terms of just openings and shock value. Definitely the opening is one of my likes in this movie. Also the cast. I'm going to talk about the 80s movies a lot in this review because this is something that took it to the next level. And with all those sequels that came from the 80s, some of the cast members you didn't even care about. You didn't remember their names. You were just waiting for Jason or Michael or Freddie to take them out because they had no life, you know. And these characters all have a different story, and it feels organic when they're together. So, starting with Nev Campbell, the final girl, you know, people at this time only really knew her from The Craft, you know, Party of Five and shows like that. You know, she plays the main girl, Sidney Prescott, and her best friend Tatum, Rose McGowan, wasn't really huge in '96. Skeet Ulrich, who plays Sydney's boyfriend, was also in The Craft at this time, and he was kind of like discount Johnny Depp. In fact, Wes Craven picked him because he reminded him of how Johnny Depp looked in Nightmare on Elm Street. So he was kind of like the heartthrob. So his character, the boyfriend, he's kind of quiet, but he's supposed to be good looking. So you would think like, okay, he's not the killer. You know, he looks too good to do this. And that's some funny shit because in real life, people look at other people and it's like, well, this person looks too good to be doing all this crazy shit. But we'll get on to that. And his best friend, Stu, played by Matthew Lillard, you know, later on, you know, to be known as Shaggy from Scooby-Doo, Without a Paddle. He steals every scene that he's in, you know, because he's the comedic relief. Him and Jamie Kennedy as Randy. And Randy is pretty much every horror, you know, geek there is. You know, he speaks for them. He knows about every movie, every reference. He actually has that scene where he steals, where he tells everybody the rules of horror movies.
For instance, number 1, you can never have sex. Big no-no! Big no!
I'm a dead man.
Popcorn. Sex equals death, okay? Number 2, you can never drink or do drugs. No, the sin factor. It's a sin. It's an extension of number 1. And number 3, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back.
And he's definitely a fan favorite. Him and, you know, Stu are my favorites. Courtney Cox plays Gail Weathers, who is like, you know, step on anybody to get what she wants. And she's really a bitch, honestly. And I say that because watching the documentary on this movie, she actually wanted to play this role because she wanted to kind of break away from Friends a little bit and get some other experiences in her, you know, her movie choices. So she definitely knocked it out the park. You know, when I watched this, I thought she was, you know, miserable and just trying to, you know, fuck everybody over until she got to, you know, where she wanted to be. She plays the love interest of David Arquette's character, Dewey. Dewey is the, you know, the Barney Fife. Or am I saying that right? The Barney Fife or whatever of the character. He's the goofy cop. Nobody takes this guy serious, but he helps solve, you know, some of the crimes in these movies. You know, he's there until the 4th one, so you gotta give him his props with that. But I say all that to say, when you watch this movie and you see all these characters, you know, they mesh really well and it just feels organic. And that was something that horror movies were missing at the time. One of my other likes about the movie, now that it's so old, the nostalgic factor. Randy works at a video store. It's like Blockbuster, and that, like, looking back at that, it's just like such a fun time. And it was a time before cell phones, which is another funny part of this movie because the killer haunts people by calling their phones, and he was pretty much calling their house phones. So it was a time before cell phones, and so much so that Billy gets caught with a cell phone in this movie, and he becomes the #1 suspect because even these suburban kids didn't have cell phones. You know, in 1996, it wasn't a big thing. So he was looked at as a huge suspect after, you know, showing up to Sydney after she was getting attacked. His cell phone dropping was a big clue, like this dude might be the killer. Yeah, just the nostalgic, you know, part of this movie, and I'm super happy that they're gonna do a sequel to this because Wes Craven really did his thing with this. One of my last likes about it is the reveal because it gets really messy. It's not, to some it doesn't come off as a huge shock because if you're like paying attention, you can see who the creeps are in the movie and they kind of like give each other, you know, these eyes when, you know, they always have an alibi about where they are. So pretty much, you know, Sydney gets attacked a couple times. She stays by Tatum's house. The town goes on curfew, so school's out. And Stu pretty much throws a huge house party, and that's where the final act takes place. And it's pretty damn good. And then you learn that Billy and Stu are the killers, and his motive is because Sydney's mother, who was killed a year ago, was sleeping with his father, and it caused his mother to leave and abandon them, and he was obviously pissed about that. So he killed her mother a year before with him, Stu. you know, that big reveal was something that, you know, had never been done before, where it was so intertwined and it was a town with all these secrets and things like that. It was just such a great script. You know, we had never seen that before. No movie is without its, you know, the little nitpicks or my dislikes. So I will say that I dislike the movies that come after this. You know, like I liked them back then, but it's just so much of a simple copycat. Even if some of them were written by the same person, it just seems so funny to go back and watch. Like I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend, Halloween H2O. They're good movies, but none of them top this, and you can tell that they were, you know, going directly influenced by this movie. If I had to pick another dislike for this movie, it would definitely have to be the killer, Billy or Stu. A lot of times in this movie, they spend on the ground. They're always chasing Sydney and falling and just missing their target. You kind of think like, what the hell is the plan? Because they keep messing up. You know, they kind of gave the Wayans brothers all the material in the world to make a scary movie when you really think about it, because they took stuff directly from this movie and made fun of it, which was cool too. Yeah, so out of a like it, love it, or hate it, I'll give this movie a love it. You know, it's a classic. It's something I throw on, you know, every now and then, and, you know, definitely around the Halloween season. And yeah, like I said, I'm looking forward to that new one that's dropping. And yeah, that's it. If you like what you saw, leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment, tell me what you liked about this movie, and leave some suggestions. I'll be, you know, more than happy to take some suggestions and review some of the movies that you like. You know, maybe you might be able to put me up. Yeah, I'm Casey. This is Watch a Few Movies, Take a Few Notes. I'm out.